and on Facebook on 3FM 92.7, also all across the world on 3news.com, on DSTV channel 279. Here on Key Point, we dwell on the key issues that are of concern to you, the Ghanaian people. We go straight to the point, to the benefit of all. Industry has also been heavily hit by the economic situation that we find ourselves in. The leadership of industry has been proposing measures that need to be considered if we're going to at least have some level of cushioning while we chart the path to economic recovery. Because when they suffer, we suffer as well. Let's take a listen to the president talk about some of the interventions to save local industry in this country. And I introduce my guest. Take a look.
My fellow Ghanaians, the success of our efforts at diversifying the structure of the Ghanaian economy from an import-based one to a value-added exporting one is what will, in the long term, help strengthen our economy. We're making some progress with the 1D, 1F, but our current situation requires that we take some more stringent measures to discourage the importation of goods that we can and do produce here. To this end, we will review the standards required for imports into the country. We will prioritize the imports, as well as review the management of our foreign exchange reserves in relation to imports of products such as rice, poultry, vegetable oil, toothpicks, pasta, fruit juice, bottled water, and ceramic tiles, and others, which with intensified government support and that of the banking sector, can be manufactured and produced in sufficient quantities in Ghana. Government will in May 2023, that is 6 months from now, review the situation.
Well, so that's President Akufo-Addo on what is being done to protect local industry. I touch on a number of things. Dr. Humphrey Kwesi Ayim-Dake is the president of the Association of Ghana Industries, and Mr. Clement Osei-Amoako is the president of the Ghana National Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Gentlemen, good morning. Thank you.
Good morning.
For joining us here on Key Point. Now, let's try and understand what is happening now to industry. And I'll start off with you, Dr. Ayim-Dake.
All right, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. And as captured by the president, with clear admission of a state of crisis, in the said state of crisis that indicates there's disruption to some extent in the economic activities in all blocks or all sectors of the economy. And same it is with our space of industry. Mm-hmm. Yes, and in the statement of the president, he sought to do the tracing from both local and international dimension, and for which cause we find ourselves in the said space. Admittedly, that this is what the position is. Our case in industry is what are the remedies. It's necessary to, at this stage, gather the courage as the president did. And then from there, with what he's outlined as part of his proposed solutions, players in the space or actors in the various sectors of the economy should quickly rally around the said call and then develop modalities to circumvent the challenges as it is. It's not my wish to reiterate all the said challenging positions that I believe we all, as a date, are aware of. What can we say as a source of hope? That there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and how quickly can we all come together and then take the charge and seek to rectify the disruptions that has befell us. So this has been the position of AGI leadership, and in the private sector, in recent engagement with the president, and beyond the president's speech, AGI took the opportunity to gather a number of its members and in a discourse to figure out what would be our preferred solutions. You could realize that most of our advocacy position over the period has still been our point, because we believe that when some policies were tabled, we had concerns with them. So we still believe those policies, once we could tackle them and reverse some and tweak a bit of it, the productive sector would bounce back. If you carefully study the government statisticians' data gathering, it indicates the rate of growth in the manufacturing space. We manufacturing because it's become the process through which value addition, it's added to our primary raw materials, which has been the bane of most governments regarding the Guggisberg economy. So that's how important it is that we need to scale up our manufacturing capacity. And that is when the president is making mention of prioritizing some products to give us the opportunity to take advantage of the market. By the declaration of the president on this space, you realize that a market has been created for the manufacturers and the private sector. How do you take advantage of that declaration? It calls for capacity building, it calls for interventions, policy intervention. Some may be monetary, some might be just policy tweaking, some might be an ability to reverse some form of taxes and some incentives. Then we could take charge. So this is the way forward we seek to deploy.
I see. What are those specific policies that you had concerns with earlier?
Well, these are well-known policies. We all are aware of the tax policy, specifically on the VAT structure. We have engaged on that a number of times. We believe we can retweak it and it can serve us better than it is now. And in the same space of the VAT, there are a lot of breaches. In a recent survey conducted by GRA, it was evident that a number of companies and a number of private sector players are not paying their VAT tax that they have collected legitimately from the customer. That is not right. That is not the money of any private company or any business promoter. It's a tax that must go to government. So our prayer in that engagement with the president is that we saw the intention of rolling out the EVAT. It is necessary government goes all out. It might not be comfortable, but that would be one of the tools to rake in significant revenue for the purposes of nationhood development and the balancing of our debts. Besides that of the VAT, we mentioned the famous benchmark discount value, which we believe it also needs a tweaking. And in the third promise, in the rollout, government indicated that by the end of year, we'll get a full reversal. But just reversing it, it's not enough. We also believe there must be a zero-rated import duty on industrial raw materials. The reversal is on finished goods. By virtue of that policy, most industries became uncompetitive amidst other factors of production that already exist. Whilst we're grappling with other factors of production, we believe where policy can easily be reversed, government should go for it. And then in the midst of that, we urge government to do more post-production taxation as against pre-taxation. Furthermore, there were other related issues like the COVID-19 crisis brought about some taxes on our import duty. So when you look at the import list and the levies we pay at the port, some of this policy we believe should be reversed in the budget. And thirdly, the pricing of some activities at the port of entry in dollars must be considered and reversed. This amidst a few other policy alternatives that we've been proposing, we believe will be part of the immediate solution whilst we look out to the medium and long term.
So you had the assurance that by end of year, the benchmark value policy will be reversed or reviewed.
You're in the media space. I mean, that was part of government's communication in the said period. So in our engagement, that assurance still stands, and we believe it's important. Because you see, once you do that, the demand of, it's part of the demand on the importation of plethora of goods coming into the country. Given that that policy is reversed, yes, a lot of finished goods that can be produced in Ghana would be produced in Ghana. Where we have capacity, we would ramp it up, and then the demand would then give an inspiration to a promoter of a business to put in more capital to scale up his capacity for both export and the African markets.
Zamakon, you are, as in the Chamber of Commerce and Industry, more of like the voice of the business community in this country, and with your representation across all sectors and industry. How would you assess the impact of the situation that we have now on these specific sectors as per your correspondence with some of your members?
Hey, thank you so much, and good morning to my council members and listeners this morning. Before I come straight to the question, I think that we would have to let listeners know why we are in this situation.
Indeed.
And so it started with COVID-19 and its impact on the various economies. What happened is that there were excessive demand and supply, which distorted the market. Because people were eager to demand, because looking at it, the entire 2020 and part of 2021, all that we were looking for is our survivorship. So a lot of people had to hold on their demand. So when it came that demand had gone up, then there was a need for us to look at the supply side, which was where we had some difficulties. And then it came with the Western sanctions on Ukraine war, which also had bottlenecks with us. It has come to a situation where even the most big economies are even getting close to recession. And US and other countries are part of those countries that we can use, for example. So it came out with high debt levels, rising debt levels, high interest rate, among others. While we find ourselves a situation in Ghana now, with the data that I have, the macroeconomic data that I have, we have inflation hovering around 37.2%. Borrowing rate, the primary rate is around 24%. Interest rate, yes, that's for interest rate. We also have, on the food basket, that causes inflation. We have food only constitute about 34%. We have debt to GDP ratio around 90.1%. And with the government budget for this year, we realize that even though it's moving within the budgeted figure, but there's a shortfall in revenue, bringing a gap of about 41.1 billion cedis. Now, how does the government finance it? With these bottlenecks from the post-COVID issues vis-a-vis with the Russian and Ukraine war. And so the government decided to raise revenue to support its plan, expenditure. And that could not also work. And so that has compounded to the problem as we speak now. Now, when you talk about exchange rates, with the exchange rate to the dollar, we are seeing a huge decline of about 52%. That's the depreciation of the cedi. And it's unprecedented in the history of this country that we have such margin of 52%. As businessmen, we have to forecast into the future to mitigate our risk.
That is between January and now?
Yes. We have to
the
forecast.
Cedi has depreciated
yes.
by
Last year was
52%.
about 4.2. And so nobody sits down to envisage that we are going to have such a huge depreciation of the cedi. And what also caused it was the speculative aspect of it, where people have to jump and make noise, send videos and cassettes that are not relevant for the growth of this economy and brought panic into the system. And people had to protect their hard-earned currency, some rushing to change foreign currency for keep, others going into properties, and others to running away from the city because eventually they have lost interest in that. With the government coming up to that, its effect has been very huge on the business. In that, you can't forecast. And some businesses have to price them in dollar. And so that when you go, you don't have the price list. They only convert it when you come. I was at a shopping mall and I saw that. Overdependent on foreign goods is also an issue we have to look at. So I wasn't surprised when the government came out to look at some few things that we can produce to build the capacity of Ghanaians. And even with the emergence of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, it is about time we reposition our industry and made them very vibrant, together with the private sector and other SMEs that will supply within the supply chain. And so I wasn't surprised when the government came out to suggest that that is the way to go. In our meeting with the government, we were concerned about the exchange rate, and we suggested some few other things. Especially, we were very happy for the intervention of the governor for having gathered all the Forex Bureau leaders to discuss issues with them. And I think that this should have been done earlier to forestall this kind of circulation that have been in existence. And then even with those orthodox ones that are not even within the Forex, the allergies that have been changing money, they have a good name for it.
They've got a black market.
The black market. In a situation where you cannot control the informal sector, it becomes very risky. And so I think that if government can come together and put them in association so that they can regulate their activities, because even if you drive them from the market, they have the contacts and they are doing business. So why don't put them together and regulate them by the
How do you
central bank?
regulate a situation like this? Like
You get them registered, you get them leaders.
that's why
form
there
an
are Forex
association.
bureaus. I mean, if the Forex Bureau's intervention is supposed to address that regularization of that industry, so how do you regularize the activities of black market operators?
You cannot run away. They are still operating.
That's
And
a
so
fact. That's a fact.
arresting them will not solve the problem. They are still there feeding people. People have their contact, bank have their contacts, and they are still working. But if you bring them under one umbrella and we have an issue, we can bring them and discuss with them like the way they did with the Forex Bureau leaders. And then you can regulate them. You can take tax, earn some money from them from their activities that they are operating that we are not making.
I just wanted that to underscore this. So if it's an illegality, it's an illegality. I mean, an attempt to regulate an illegality would not address the fundamental problem. It's as if then if everything that is illegal should be regularized to ensure proper control, then we might as well be looking at regularizing a lot of illegalities. That's where my concern is. But I understand the issue of re-identifying them to be able to control their work. The approach of the Bank of Ghana, if that is actually going to work or address the fundamental problem in there. And what gap is this black market filling? And what can be done to address that particular gap? And that's where we should be,
Okay, so
addressing our
if
minds.
that is not feasible, then the law must be enforced because they are still existing and creating a lot of gaps. So in addition to what we said, we also realized that most of the sectors that drive this economy are not in the hands of Ghanaians. And at this time, assuming my brother from AGI has a big business in the oil industry, even in the telecommunication industry, this is the time the government can bring them and sit them down. Now, look, this is our nation. What can we do? And so we realized that we have to build the capacity of the Ghanaians and push them up so that when we have issues, they can come back and help us. What we saw is that another thing that we saw was the repatriation of the foreign currency. And it is agreed and accepted that if you come and you have a business with us, you can repatriate your profits and some capital just to allow them to bring the money. But what are we saying? At the beginning of the year, they go to the market and want to repatriate their money, and they are all in foreign currency. So it brings a lot of untold hardship on us, whereby we look at it from January, the cedi will depreciate hugely. because they are repatriating their capital. We suggested that can it be possible that we can spread that repatriation of their profits? Could it be first quarter, second quarter with some percentage in order not to siphon the sources that we have? And so with the oil industry and those that drive the sectors, we are also saying that, look, can you retain part of your profit with the local banks just to support them? And so that in times of this, we'll have something to fall back. And these were some of the issues that we raised with the government, among others.
Okay. And we'll also look at the solutions. See, Dr. Ibnake, and I'll come back to you, because these issues that both of you have outlined, they are not new. I mean, COVID brought its own dimensions of what we already know. But what has been done to ensure that local industry is able to stand on its feet, strengthened, regulatory support is giving, and then also for you to control a section of the market? Because, you see, we're on an industrialization path. And for me as a journalist, covering a number of budgets that have been presented, focusing on industrialization, and we don't see the operationalization of the said specific policies to improve on industry. It worries me. So beyond this, beyond these engagements and the promises that have been made to you, what has been done, or the promises you were made to, that, look, you're going to do A, B, and C to improve on industry? Because I'm looking at the poultry industry, and you have members who are in the poultry industry, correct? And they are saying that that industry is on the brink of collapse because about 95% of these broilers we consume are imported. You can talk about what's happening in other industries as well. So, really, what's on the ground? What has been done?
Right. Thank you again. Then, look, this is not a one proposed solution or one stroke of a pen, then you could solve all these issues. These are multifaceted engagement and operations that you need to tweak and turn, and it has history. The history goes all the way to the foundations of this country. And we all know, if you're going through our historical issues, once upon a time, from the era of Nkrumah, we had what we call industrialization. And then when we went into the structural adjustment programs, deindustrialization became the norm. Deindustrialization technically means when most industries were fading out by virtue of the Bretton Woods institutional reforms that we went in through the liberalization of our economy. So when you want to trace and bring resolution to this, you see the historical antecedents playing.
Indeed.
To the extent that beyond the deindustrialization, servicification, which we call the service industry, dominated the economic space. So that's the history behind it. So government in, government out comes with propositions to resolve this canker that has spanned 60 years plus of nationhood. So for you to tackle this, there are major issues that you need to do. And you could, and I can do a reference to the 10-point agenda of the Ministry of Trade in the current regime that is sought to use to bring about some extent of transformation agenda. As per your question, what have they done to do the same? Once you seek to use those 10-point agenda to correct some structural issues, there is a large informal sector of this economy. The extent of informality, just like the one explained by the Guru and Alaji boys in the space of the Forex, are now part of the difficulties in controlling, say, the Forex. But the nature of our economy, where servicification or the service industry dominates beyond industry, that informality becomes a reality. So you realize that this government's proposal was, let us digitize. It's one of the medium through which you can leapfrog and then perfect or correct the informality in our economy. The informality therefore leads to a lot of people not paying taxes. And once that becomes the bane, you realize that productivity or revenue generation to government then weakens. So when a government comes into power and you do not focus on transforming those sectors, it becomes difficult to meet your revenue basket. And that is why part of the activities is that Ghana tax contribution to GDP is about 13%, as against.
It's one of the lowest in the sub-region.
And you could even realize that in that space, a lot of indirect taxes are the approach by government, taxing through VAT, taxing through petroleum products. However, in that vein, even you need to develop strategies to collect a lot of the taxes, and I indicated. So those weaknesses are now part of the issues we need to grapple. So you could see that government has made significant interventions through digitizing to formalize, bringing in agenda points that they are approaching, like 1D, 1F, planting for food and jobs. One may say, yes, they are policy interventions. The extent of success is what you got to analyze. Would you say that these policies that have been rolled out to some extent has had some
the extent of impact?
That is what you see. And then you ask yourself, when you're dealing with a 60+ years canker, how many years do you need to do the reforms? What is the speed that you need to deploy? That is why the agency of the government, and especially the president, when he took power, said that, look, I'm in a hurry. Remember that statement? To correct the wrongs. And therefore, when he brought in about the number of ministers, people, though they had concerns, he said he had a clear agenda, the time frame was short.
But have the concerns been corrected? Or
So those
been
are
in a
the
hurry
point of evaluation. And I keep saying, at this stage when you find yourself in crisis, in a point where you need to move forward, yes, you need history. You need to analyze where the mistakes are and then perfect it and then leapfrog in trying to attain your goals. So yes, government has rolled out a number of interventions. The impact needs to be assessed by all the economic indicators that we find ourselves. And in the midst of that, then issues like this force majeure and then international related crisis then comes in. What was your alternative plan in terms of cushioning yourself, knowing historical that every decade there comes external factors that play in. Those are the issues we need to assess and pick it up from there.
So, Mr. Mako, while we're rounding up, so what are the specific short-term measures? I mean, because we're looking at how this can be ameliorated immediately, while we look at the medium to long term. But specifics, what needs to be in place now to ensure that in the chamber of industry is able to thrive and overcome these challenges we're faced with?
Okay, thank you so much. Fortunately, we have some economies that have gone through this and they are out. And Ghanaians, I'm proud of them, we can do it this time as well. My brother mentioned what happened in Nkrumah's time when it was government-led. I think that we have to look at the import substitution for which the government, we need to support them. Nkrumah-led was government-led one, and then it came to private-led for Buzia, and Achampong came in, and all the time we have been saying, Operation Feed Yourself. And so we asked ourselves, over these years, what have changed? And so we think that the position of the government is the way to go, but we want the government to lead. The government is leading because there are key policies that need to put in place. One, he said he was going to take effect from May. It means that some communication must be out for Ghanaians to know that we are moving into a modern Ghana. What are our vision within the future? So that we can all know where we are going. With that, we will have to go back and look at made in Ghana goods. We have to create a raw material base for those items that are going to be in production here. And how do we do that? So it has a whole lot of things. How do we grow them? Whether are we going to import the raw materials? Is it feasible? Is it not going to incur extra costs for Ghanaians? We need to look at that one. But we must be proud as Ghanaians that we are going to consume our own goods and help our local industry to thrive. And so I feel that is a good thing. Government must lead. The private sector will support. And by that, those economies, Russia and Britain that started with the US, etc., succeeded with the government leading the face of it. And so what we are talking about is that the private sector, and for that matter, the chamber, is ready to help government to move forward.
Right.
And all those solutions that we have put in place, we will make sure and ensure that the government moves with it and we create a very successful governance into
Good
the
point.
future.
Dr. Imdake, finally.
Finally, we of AGI has said to government that in the circumstances we find ourselves, our investments and our capital in our various operations are challenged. And for that cause, we cannot sit aloof and pretend we are not part of this boat. And therefore, we pledge to government. And in a recent engagement we had with the president and the finance minister, we did say the same. That if we reflect on what happened in the year 2021, when we're passing the budget, and the concern regarding the e-levy really derailed the passage of the budget, and then the rating agencies then started rating the country, we all saw what we find ourselves in. So we are very much concerned about the budget coming up, and therefore we are making inputs and consulting government where we need to even be proactive. We do same, so that we do not find ourselves in a situation whereby this 2023 budget would derail the future as well. So we have our hands on deck. The call of the president of the prioritization of the imports, we have decided to gather our companies to stand up to the call, prepare ourselves, identify the gaps, identify businesses that are willing to support government in the listed products that will cause the reversal of the forex, rice, pasta, and tiles, and any product that we can produce here, what we do in readiness. Amidst this, we believe that the IMF proposals coming up will definitely come with some austerity and contraction. So there'll be a bit of pain, out of which we will get success. That orientation, we expect the media to drive in that. And once we do that collectively, together we must pledge our support to government and reassure the citizenry that we can get out of this together. It cannot be done by government only. And if we all sit back and only go about creating more tension in the system, businesses will suffer by virtue of that element of tension. It is not right for businesses to thrive within that setting. That is why we are going out there from the AGI perspective, and you can see a lot of clips out, a lot of information out, that we are pledging our support to government because they have the mandate of the people, and as it is by the Constitution, we need to work together to get out of this situation. Let us put our hands together on deck. Criticism and the opportunity to vent is also a therapy. It aids and it allows people to come. But we should be measured in the form of criticism, and let's together support government and work out of this situation.
Dr. Humphrey Kwesi Ayimdake is the president of the Association of Ghana Industries. Clement Osei-Amoako is the president of the Ghana National Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Gentlemen, thank you for coming.
Be grateful.
This is Key Point. Now,